This is group 7. We did executive function and early reading skills. This is our table of contents, so you can follow along with our slides. The present study explores the executive function and early reading skills of young children. The researchers attempted to discover how executive function skills in verbal and nonverbal tasks related to early reading skills in novice level readers, specifically that of kindergartners. Previous to the study, it had been determined that reading skills are strongly correlated with executive functioning. With knowledge of this, Foy and Mann went further to recognize the findings of other researchers that determined that executive functioning includes subcomponent processes that are necessary in reading skills. Among these subcomponents are key skills associated in learning in general, such as focus, sustained attention, working memory, shifting attention, and inhibitory control. Inhibitory control and updating or working memory were consequently discovered as being more associated with early reading and shifting, given the task is not demanding. With all this information in mind, it is important to note that the literacy achievement gap begins before children enter kindergarten. So understanding the development of the executive function subcomponents during early years of reading and learning to read may lead to more effective intervention programs for children with learning disabilities. Driven by this idea, Foy and Mann examined pre-literacy skills of beginning readers in relation to verbal and nonverbal executive functions in go, no-go tasks, which include the subcomponents discussed in the Bannock, Friedman, and Miyake study. The researchers then decided to borrow the concept of the original auditory continuous performance task, a task that used environmental sounds. For their purpose, Foy and Mann used speech sounds instead in order to compare speech and non-speech. Foy and Mann hypothesized that their research would unveil a significant difference between the verbal and nonverbal executive function measures and how they correlate to phonological, letter skills, and reading. A task involving phonological stimuli in executive function then might relate to reading in aspects that are not the same as auditory nonverbal skills. Additionally, the researchers believe that the executive function skills, especially those in misses and false alarms on no-go tasks, would be related to early literacy skills in kindergartners, given previous reports in literacy learning and the role of executive function in literacy development.
The researchers used a go, no-go task, which measures the ability of subjects to respond to certain stimuli, go, and to resist other stimuli, no-go. With these restrictions in mind, the experiment conductors formed a go, no-go continuous performance task that has been used in previous studies, such as the auditory continuous performance test for preschoolers in 2001. In this original task, they used environmental sounds like a dog barking and a bell ringing to provide measures related to updating errors, reaction time, and inhibiting components. The difference in this new study that used the auditory continuous performance test for preschoolers as its base added speech sounds so they could compare speech and non-speech. The subjects for each test were 41 kindergartners, all 5 years old, that completed verbal and nonverbal performance tasks that recorded measures of executive functions like misses, false alarms, shifts, as well as reaction time. 9 individual tests were conducted throughout the year for the experiment. The year-end measures of early reading skill included tests of phoneme awareness, letter knowledge, and reading. In addition to the role of inhibitory skills in reading, verbal inhibitory executive function skills were tied more closely to early reading than other verbal or nonverbal skills when age, short-term memory, and vocabulary were controlled. The experiment conductors based their experiment methods off of previous recorded studies that examined executive function subcomponents such as sustained attention and memory and impulsivity that link to early literacy. This is what caused them to make the subjects young children. The study mentioned that the measures of shifting appear to be less reliable than the inhibiting components and that there is more data about letter knowledge than with phonological awareness. With the acknowledgement that these previous studies had no appropriate nonverbal control task, they structured their experiment to cover potential outlying variables and rely more on letter knowledge and inhibiting components. Dependent variables in each of these tests, nonverbal and verbal executive function, included average response time and rates of misses and false alarms in the first block, as well as differences in error rates and reaction time for the second block compared to the first block. All 9 tasks had numerous independent variables to decrease potential outliers in the results. For example, in a previous nonverbal task, the independent variables were the verbal and nonverbal stimuli and the additional block of trials. The children were asked to respond to a target, a barking dog, and to ignore a distractor, a ringing bell. In 2 blocks where the target was infrequent relative to distractors, so 4 targets, 11 distractors, and then the target was frequent relative to distractors, so 11 targets, 4 distractors. They replicated this test, but added in a second block where the targets and distractors were reversed in order to study the children's ability to switch responses from block to block. After a block of 30 trials, 15 targets and 15 distractors, the target was then switched so that the subjects then had to respond to the new target, which had previously been a distractor. So from the dog barking being a target to now it being the distractor. The independent variables in this example are the infrequent target to distractions, the frequent target to distractions, reversing the order of the target to distractions, increasing the amount of target and distractions, and the role reversal of the target and distractions.
Throughout this research, the results found that early reading measures and RT shifts were normally distributed, and EF skills in one domain did not correlate and generalize with another domain. In this instance, it was verbal to nonverbal. The research also suggests that early reading skills have the possibility to be improved by training children to inhibit responses. Differences between EF measures in the nonverbal and verbal tasks, along with these false alarms, D prime, shift misses, shift false alarms, shift D prime, shift T verbal, and nonverbal RT measures were found to be significantly correlated. So essentially, except for RT, verbal task performance is not correlated with nonverbal tasks. Regarding the second hypothesis, the false alarms were found to be related to reading skills in both verbal and nonverbal tasks independent from age. Controlling variables such as age, memory, and vocabulary tended to not change the relations between EF and EF related measures and early readings, keeping it normally distributed. Further examination to see whether children with deficits in early reading skills are best served by tasks that develop EF skills, like phonemic awareness and letter names. And there's more suggested further research into specific domains in EF that should be carried out due to many EF interventions using nonverbal stimuli during training. This was our presentation, and thank you.